Hey everyone, how's it going? Today I'm going to be bringing you another Pauper deck tech. This time we're going to be looking at blue-white Affinity. Now, blue-white Affinity isn't similar to, I don't know, like a regular Affinity list where, you know, it's 4 color and you're running stuff like Carapace Forager and stuff like that and like Galvanic Blast. Instead, we're going to be going a more control-ish route. So let's go ahead and take a look at what's inside the deck. Before I start the actual deck tech, if you like this video, make sure to like it and leave a comment down below. And be sure to subscribe and share this video. I'm trying to get to over 1,000 subs before the year is over, and both sharing and subscribing is the best way to support me and my channel. Starting off the list, we have 4th Raven Inspector. So Raven Inspector is a 1-drop, 1/2. When it enters the battlefield, we investigate. So it helps make a clue for us. And during early testing, I noticed that it was a big issue for this deck to not have a body on the ground that was early in the game. And Raven Inspector fits that role perfectly, and it also adds an artifact to our lineup for our Affinity. So it's just a great card for the deck. Next, we have 3 Auriok Sunchaser. Auriok Sunchaser is 1 and a white for a 1/1, but if we get Metalcraft, it can get +2/+2 in flying. This card is alright. In a more aggressive list, this card is obviously much better, but it's another early body for us to help put blockers down, and it's also a flyer, and it can help us get in some damage whenever we need to. Plus, it's also a removal magnet for any of the larger stuff that we're going to be playing later in the game. Our first Affinity creature is Mirror Enforcer. Mirror Enforcer is a 7-drop 4/4 with Affinity for artifacts. So ideally we want to be casting this for 2 mana, 1 mana, even 0 mana sometimes, and just get a free 4/4 on the board. It's great for our deck since we're stalling out anyways, and then we can just slam this down for free and keep mana up for counterspell and stuff like that. Next, we have Self-Assembler. Self-Assembler is a 5 mana 4/4, and when it enters the battlefield, we can tutor for another Assembly Worker creature type card and put it into our hand. So from what I understand, this is the only Assembly Worker that's in Magic so far, so this can only tutor itself, which is just fine. You know, we're going to be spending a lot of the game removing stuff and countering spells, and once we get up to that 5, 6, 7 mana, then we just cast this. If they have a removal spell, then we have another one that this goes and grabs, and we just keep the pressure on with 4/4s until we're in a position where we just overwhelm them with larger creatures than what they have. And for the last of our creatures, we have 3 Gear Seeker Serpent. Gear Seeker Serpent is 5 and 2 blue for a 5/6, so that's 7 mana. But it does have Affinity for artifacts, even though it doesn't technically say Affinity on it. So most of the time we can cast this for 4 mana, 3 mana. Ideally, we want to be casting this for the double blue just by itself, so that way we can get a 2 mana 5/6. But its second ability is actually what makes this card super playable. For 6 mana, we can make it not be blocked this turn, which is effectively unblockable. I think they just reworded it to be this way. But yeah, for 6 mana, we can make this creature unblockable and just kill our opponents super fast after we've exhausted all of their resources. Starting off with the rest of our artifact spells, we have 4 Chromatic Star. Chromatic Star is a 1 mana artifact. We can pay a mana and sacrifice it to add a mana of any color to our mana pool, and then when it's put into a graveyard from play, we draw a card. So this really helps out with mana fixing, plus also adding to the Affinity itself, but also it being able to draw on demand is actually pretty decent in this deck, so that way we can go find a counterspell when we need it, or to go find, you know, some of our removal spells, or to go find a finisher. Having a effective cantrip like this is pretty decent in the deck. And the same is true for the last of our artifacts in the deck, which is a 3 of Prophetic Prism. Prophetic Prism is 2 mana. When it enters the battlefield, draw a card, and then we can pay a mana to tap it to add 1 mana of any color to our mana pool. So it effectively acts as a filter, much like Chromatic Star, but we get the cantrip effect immediately from casting it. The downside is that we can only cast it from turn 2 beyond, unlike Chromatic Star where we can cast it for 1 mana, but this card works just as well. But it being 2 mana and only being able to draw us a card, I did used to run 4, but I had to cut it down to 3. I'm honestly thinking about cutting it down to 2, but I haven't actually pulled the trigger on that yet. But regardless, this card is still just perfectly fine in the deck. Starting off with the control side of things for the deck, we start off with 4 Counterspell. Counterspell is double blue, counter target spell. Card's a classic. It's been around since Alpha Beta Unlimited. yeah, it's pretty much just the best counterspell in its class, and we definitely want to be jamming a playset in the deck. Next, we have a 2 of Mana Leak. Mana Leak is 1 and a blue, counter target spell unless its controller pays 3. Now, I did used to have this as a 4 of in the deck when I was first building it, but I realized quickly that opponents having that 3 extra mana is pretty common, so having a card like this is really decent in the early game, but straight up terrible in the late game. So we bring in stuff from the sideboard to take its place, and then we just use it game 1 to figure out what we're going to be using our sideboard cards for, and Mana Leak is just kind of a nice all-around counter spell, but at the same time it can't always counter everything, so that's why we're down to 2 copies as opposed to 3 or 4. Next, we have a 3 of Thoughtcast. Thoughtcast is 4 and a blue sorcery with affinity for artifacts, and then we get to draw 2 cards. So effectively, we can make this 1 mana, draw 2 cards, which is stellar in this deck. I did have this at 4, but I just kept running into issues where I wasn't able to cast it, or if I was able to cast it, it didn't line up correctly with being able to counter spells or using it to cast creature spells. I think it might be how I built the deck in total, but having 3 copies of Thoughtcast, I haven't had a problem with. I really honestly haven't wanted to go up to a 4th copy. Now I realize some people do want to go up to a 4th copy, and that's totally fine. I can understand why, but having 3 just seems right to me in this build, to be honest. So we're just keeping it at 3. For our removal, we start off with a 4 of Journey to Nowhere. Journey to Nowhere is 1 and a white. When it enters the battlefield, exile a target creature, and then when Journey leaves the battlefield, return the exiled card to the battlefield under its owner's control. So this, much like Oblivion Ring, acts as just solid removal for like anything that our opponent might have. Now, given that both this and Oblivion Ring are enchantments, they can be destroyed by someone's sideboard cards and then they get that creature back, but it's a lot better than having to rely on red or something where red can just deal damage and deal with the creature. With Journey to Nowhere and Oblivion Ring, we can just not have to worry about applying any amount of damage, and we can just get rid of a problem altogether. And the fact that it puts that creature into exile means that our opponent can't use anything in the graveyard to like get it back or to delve it away for a Gurmag Angler or what have you. And for the last of our spells, we have a 2 of Oblivion Ring. Oblivion Ring is 2 and a white for an enchantment, and when it enters the battlefield, we remove another target non-land permanent from the game. And when Oblivion Ring leaves play, we return the removed card into play under our owner's control. So a card like this, I kind of want to run more in the main deck, but essentially why I have Journey to Nowhere over Oblivion Ring is Journey to Nowhere is cheaper for one, but Journey, unlike Oblivion Ring, can't nail other things. Like Journey to Nowhere can only hit creatures, whereas Oblivion Ring can hit a bunch of artifacts or enchantments that are causing us problems. And if we run into artifacts and enchantments and stuff like that that's giving us a hard time, we have more Oblivion Rings in the sideboard to bring in to help us combat those types of situations. Starting off with our lands, we have a 4 of Ancient Den. Ancient Den is the white artifact land. It's pretty much a given for the deck. We have a 4 of Seat of the Synod, or Seat of the Synod, however you pronounce it, which is the blue artifact land. And then we have a 4 of Darksteel Citadel, which is the colorless land. So all 12 of these are artifact lands, and they help out with our affinity altogether. Without these lands, I don't think this deck would exist. Any affinity variant essentially would not exist if it weren't for the artifact lands. So these are absolutely crucial to the deck. For our duels, we have a 4 of Tranquil Cove. Enters the battlefield tapped, and then when it enters the battlefield, we gain a life. We can add a white or blue to the mana pool. And then we have a 1 of Azorius Guildgate, which is effectively the same, except it doesn't gain us a life. And to round out our lands, we have 3 islands and we have 3 plains. Starting off with our sideboard, we have 2 Dispel. Dispel is a single blue counter target instant spell. So we want to be bringing this in against other blue decks or like any burn decks that are giving us a hard time, so we can counter lightning bolts and stuff like that. Next, we have Essence Scatter. Essence Scatter is 1 and a blue instant counter target creature spell. So yeah, effectively we just bring this in against aggro matchups or like the graveyard based decks that use like Gurmag Angler and Hooting Mandrills. This is a really good blowout card because it helps get rid of their graveyard in addition to countering whatever they just exiled their entire graveyard to. Next, we have a 2 of Negate. Negate is 1 and a blue counter target non-creature spell. So we're going to be bringing this in against control matchups or decks that use non-creature spells to help get their engine going to get to the point where they win. Negate can really help us counter the spells that we need to counter, so that way they can't get ahead of us. Next, we have a 2 of Relic of Progenitus. Relic of Progenitus is 1 mana artifact. We can tap it, and target player removes a card in his or her graveyard from the game. So we can use that effect to, you know, get rid of some stuff in the graveyard that we don't want, like those Ulamog Crusher Reanimator decks. We can use this to just get rid of the Crusher before they have a chance to exhume it back out of the graveyard. And then we can use its second ability, which is a single colorless, remove Relic of Progenitus from the game, remove all graveyards from the game, draw a card. So it's effectively the same, except it takes care of all graveyards at the same time. So we hold this in against like those Tortured Existence decks, the Delve decks, any Dredge decks, effectively any deck that is using the graveyard as another resource. Relic of Progenitus is something that we definitely want to be bringing in. And not only that, but it's an artifact, so it really helps out with our Affinity synergy. And then it can also draw us a card, which is perfect in a control deck anyways. Next, we have a 3 Dust to Dust. Dust to Dust is 1 in double white for a sorcery, exile 2 target artifacts. So we want to be bringing this in against other Affinity matchups, so that way we can blow up their lands. And let me tell you, getting your lands blown up as an Affinity player is probably one of the most feel-bad moments ever. There's been a handful of games where I've been turned to smashed to smithereens and they've blown up my land, and I just can't come back from that. So having something like Dust to Dust, where we can exile not 1 but up to 2 target artifacts, so we can get rid of our opponent's lands to make sure that they stay far behind, or we can get rid of like some big finishers like their Mirror Enforcers or anything like that. Next, we have a 2 of Aura Flux. Aura Flux is 2 and a blue for an enchantment, and it reads, each other enchantment gains during your upkeep, pay 2 or sacrifice this enchantment. So this card is pretty much solely brought in against the Bogles matchup, because we really don't have a way of dealing with the creatures themselves. We have Oblivion Rings to help get rid of the enchantments to make sure like Rancor or Armadillo Cloak doesn't completely run us over, but Auraflux puts a tax on top of all those enchantments, so that way we don't have to remove them. Effectively, our opponent just keeps sacrificing them throughout the game, and they just keep having smaller creatures that we can just block with our 4/4s and our 5/6s. And to round out our sideboard, we finish the playset of Oblivion Ring, and we just bring this in against any decks where we need that more unconditional removal for. Obviously, we don't want to be bringing this in against enchantment removal based stuff, but at the same time, premium removal is premium removal, and I say that relatively because there is better removal in the format, but in terms of the color white, this is pretty much as best as you're going to get. And that's the deck tech for you guys. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know what you guys think of the deck. Put some suggestions down in the comments down below. Tell me if the deck is garbage, if you think it is. And yeah, I would love to know what you guys think of it. This is something that I've been working with for a little bit. It's kind of like a alpha/beta build. It's nowhere near being done complete. So yeah, let me know what you guys think, and I'll go ahead and catch you guys next time.
Remember to subscribe. If you don't, my brother's channel will fail, and he won't be able to eat.